What's up, and welcome back to the channel once again. So, it's already that time of year again in which we are back with the Critical Podcast for our yearly
Downs?
countdowns of top 10 stuff.
Quick of a year.
Yeah. So, we're gonna start off. This episode is gonna be the top 10 movies of 2019. Um, if you're any type of familiar with what we do, we both give our top. Like I'll give my top 10, then James will give his top 10,
Well,
or his number 10,
yeah, we trade
and
off.
then I'll give my number 9. He'll give his number 9, so on and so forth. You get it. So we're gonna do that for movies, and then the next one is gonna be music as well. So, and we're gonna do our top 10 albums and songs, and we'll do that, and we'll explain that when that podcast comes up. But movies is simple. It's movies. We just do our numbers, and that's that. And we'll usually give a little short description of why we liked it. Usually one or two reasons why we really liked those movies, and what they did to belong in that spot that we put them in.
Of course, as we get higher, our descriptions get longer.
Yeah.
We
Yeah. So, I'll start off. My number 10. My number 10 might surprise you a little bit, but as a fan of this, franchise since childhood, there was no spot I could put number 10 for other than Detective Pikachu.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the only reason I really liked it was because it was just a good video game movie adaptation, and it had some characters that I liked, and I thought it did really good with a lot of those characters. You know, and it was actually one of my higher ratings of this year. Just liked pretty much everything about it. I mean, there's no crazy, like, impactful reason other than that. It was just something I wanted to see in theaters since I was really young. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the only reason. I just really liked it. I thought it was a very well done movie.
Probably one of the better video game adaptations. It actually honors what.
Yeah.
I thought it was decent, but I've also never been a big Pokemon. I mean, when I watched it, I was like, oh, I can see how this would appeal to just big Pokemon, because it provides everything.
Yeah.
So, totally understandable that it'd be. And so my number 10. First of all, let me say this was a really good year for movies. I had a tough time coming up with my top 10. I have a list consolidated of all the movies I've seen. It was tough arranging them and just trying to figure out what I wanted there. I mean, there were some sacrifices that I had to make that couldn't make the top 10 that I really didn't want to make.
I mean,
so,
I've watched...
so I assume we'll talk about honorable mentions at
Yeah.
the end, but there are several that got so close.
I mean,
did
we've
not
watched
make
so
it.
many movies this year. I've literally had to go back to your website just to even remember what we've seen.
Yeah, and I mean, some of them I haven't even viewed on my website, so you may have
Yeah.
missed some. But my number 10 is one that I saw, but I don't think you've seen. Booksmart. So basically, it's a coming of age movie. It's about these two girls there getting ready to graduate high school. And they're both like top of their class. Like one is valedictorian, they're saluted. And they, in the process of their senior year, they discover in sort of comical ways from other people that other people were doing well in school and got good college scholarships. And they were also able to have fun and mess around and party and stuff. And these girls, all they ever did was study in school. So they never did the party scene. All they did was study. And so these girls are both like, why we've been wasting all our time in high school not having fun, just studying, and we've missed out on so many things. So why don't we just make this last night before graduation like the craziest night of our lives? So it's a pretty simple plot there, but I think what really works about it is just the chemistry between the two characters. They're both they really work off each other well, and it's one of those movies where I feel like the characters would have lives outside of the film. That's how well developed they are, and their friendship is just so believable. and it's interesting to see the places it goes. It's not exactly what you'd predict where it ends up at, which is what I really liked. Like, coming of age movies are a dime a dozen now. It takes a lot to like upend the formula or anything like that. And this was by was it? It's an actress. Yeah, Olivia Wilde. It was directed by Olivia Wilde, and it was her directorial debut, if I remember right. And it was quite the impressive directorial debut. I think what I like the most about the movie, though, is that in like a lot of high school coming of age films, they make all the other high school characters besides the main ones like stereotypes. Like you got the stereotypical jock, the stereotypical hot girl, the drug addict, stuff like that. Those characters appear in this film, but when the film goes on, it shows that they have personalities beyond just what school labels them as. Like, there's a lot more complexity to them, and there's a lot more to them, which is what I really liked, that our main characters learned not only about themselves, but about how they've been misjudging these people around them this whole time, that if they'd gotten to know them better, they might have seen them beyond stereotypes. I really liked that. The film was very visually creative. There was just a lot of cool visual tricks and stuff that I would not have expected to come out of the film. There was this bizarre drug trip scene where it turns animated, even though the whole film is live action. So overall, it was just it was a really surprising film, and it came out way early in the year, but it stuck with me. That's why it's my number. Really good. Goes beyond the cliche of what a typical coming of age film is like.
Well then, so my number 9, again, might be a little bit off the beaten path, but this was one of those movies I felt got screwed over by the fact that it's a book adaptation, and it's a horror movie, and it's a horror author that's very popular, and it's one of his lesser known, and I think a lot of people were confused by this movie. I mean, I was, but my number 9 is Pet Sematary. Me and, I mean, all four of us, in fact, went to go see this movie together.
That's one of my least favorite movies of the year, so.
And me and Sammy both really, I mean, I think Sammy liked it, but I think it was one of those movies that oddly stuck with me throughout. Like, a lot of the horror movies this year, I feel like haven't really stuck well, for me at least, but I think this was one of the ones that kind of shocked me. I like surreal horror a lot, and this one kind of gave that surreal sort of atmosphere to it. And I think what I liked about it the most was that it had a little bit of an interesting lore to it that I found interesting, and just the general concept surrounding it. It's not one of the best horror movies ever, for sure, but I think one of the things I liked about it was just that lore around all that. And I mean, it was just a psychological horror is kind of difficult to do, and it was one of those psychological horror movies that's kind of rare to find, because most horror movies are like It or like Insidious or whatever, where it's got this sort of not psychological but more just like intense thriller horror action. And where this one took a bit more of a subtle approach to its story and its characters and all that, and there was something I appreciated about how they just dove into that surreal atmosphere and never let it go, and they really delved into that lore that was like really interesting. In that way, I think I appreciated that they went kind of full into the weirdness of it.
Yeah, that one does actually surprise me. I thought you were setting up for Dr. Sleep there. But I have a feeling that one will be appearing, based on how we've talked. Yeah, okay. My number 9, and I had a hard time choosing between this movie and another, because I feel like these movies are both sort of similar to one another in a way. Like, they're both about obnoxiously rich families, and they both have like a female protagonist that sort of is the outsider and comes in and sort of shakes things up. But the one I ultimately went with was Ready or Not for number 9, and it was a tough choice. So I mean, I might as well say what the other one is. My honorable mention would be Knives Out, because that one was awfully good too. But those are very similar to one. But I think the reason that Ready or Not stood out to me so much is that it surprised me how much I enjoyed it. Like, I knew with the trailer that when I saw the trailer that I'd want to see it, but it's one of the most enjoyable watching experiences I've had all year, and the black humor in it is just on point. It's one of the funniest movies I've seen this year as well. Just the dark humor is on point in every second. There's just so many good jokes, especially with the more heavy-set character, the one that carries the bow around. Mm-hmm. I mean, his performance. I'm gonna have to be sure to give him.
Professionals, by the way.
Yeah, I should have had these prepared. Yeah, Christian Brunn as Fitch Bradley is the character's name, which just sounds like a pretentious rich person name. It's just perfect. And what I liked about his performance so much, he was probably my favorite, but besides the main girl, was that he said his lines, every line he said with such conviction, and played it so straight that it was even funnier, because it was like he didn't know how much of a moron he was. And it was just so funny. And of course, Samara Weaving in the main role as Grace was excellent. She really just shouldered this lead role excellently. This is one of her first bigger roles, from what I understand. I remember seeing her in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. She was in that. I don't remember the moment, but she played in that. But she had impressive range in this, going through the gamut of emotions and really holding the movie together. I think she just did a great job.
I mean, if you haven't seen it, the ending is one of the most excellently executed moments in films this year.
Yes, just the ending blew me away.
The film just turns around so many times, you really don't know what happened.
Yeah.
It's kind of the purpose of the movie, too.
Yeah, and what I mean, the concept of the movie is so simple that these characters are just, this horrible rich family has this game that they play, hide and seek, and it seems all so innocent, but then people are going around killing this one person. And it sounds so dark, but it's just so funny, because all these characters are treating it like it's just a household chore they have to take care of, because they've done it so much. So it's like, oh, we have to do this, and that's what makes it funnier, is because the characters just treat it so casually. All of them do.
There have been 2 horror movies where they've been treated as a game. One's Saw, and then one's Ready or Not.
Yeah, right.
So, who knows?
And plot-wise, the movie is just clever. How they originally, I had a problem with this, but I like that they the character justify how the main character stays in the house. Like, there's this scene with the car that I originally thought was a little too convenient, but then I was like, well, this is more of a satirization of the rich. Like, they have these cars that only they can control, and they just have to do all these things to control the car. So it is a pretty funny moment. And it's just, the main character gets funnier and funnier as she gets more and more frustrated with these people. And the plot is so clever in how it sets up, in particular, her husband. Like, you think he's going one way, but then he ends up another, and when you go back and think about it, it makes sense how it was set up, and it's so clever. So, yeah, I mean, this movie was great. It was funny. It was
one of the best, if not the best, satire of horror I've seen, probably.
Yeah, it's a satirical horror. It makes fun of horror, but it is also legitimately pretty tense in parts too. It finds that balance, which is so hard to do. I love horror movies like these when they do it. So yeah, that's why this one made the list. It's just so much fun.
Yeah. So you nailed the nail right on the head, because my number 8 is in fact Dr. Sleep.
Oh, okay.
The very next thing I had a good dosage of horror movies on my top 10 this year, which was nice. I feel like last year wasn't quite as good for horror as this year was. There was,
place being.
yeah, that was the big one. Yeah. But I mean, Doctor Sleep is, I mean, the first thing that stands out about Doctor Sleep is how well it follows up to the almost impossible mantle of The Shining to live up to. It's a sequel in many ways, in pretty much all the ways actually. It's literally a sequel, but it's kind of it's got this. It's from the trailer you get this impression that it's gonna be more of an action-oriented film with all this weirdness. Like the film showed off a lot of the freaking soul suckers or whatever they are. The trailer shows a lot of them, and I was so nervous for how the film was gonna be because I was like, this is not gonna be good.
Yeah, it looks
then
bad.
you watch it, and it truly goes to show that they made a very good trailer, that they only brought those parts into it. Like when you watch the full film, it becomes very apparent that it's got some nice depth to it, but it's also it also encompasses, I think I said this after we watched it too, that it seems to encompass just about every genre of horror, like every subgenre. Like there's some intensity, there's some thrilling stuff, there's some surrealism, there's all that stuff. And I think that's just why it's so good, is because it's one of those movies, and similarly to The Shining was the same way, where it felt like this sort of conglomeration of all of the genres of horror, and it does fall through in that same way. And I mean, we both said this after the movie, that this movie continues to prove how underrated and underappreciated Ewan McGregor is, and
Absolutely.
he needs more roles. And
Yes.
I think everyone says it enough. And you know, I mean, everyone in the little girl, I forgot her actress's name, but she did good. And the Mexican guy, I think it was the Mexican guy, was really good too.
Which one? The villain one or the one
villain one.
Oh yeah, the eagle.
Yeah. I mean, Doctor Sleep is just one of those rare movies where it seems like both the first and the second movie are good, and kind of hard to do with horror movies. There are very few horror movies that have a good first movie and then 30 years later manage to make something that almost as good as the original.
And when you got something as iconic as The Shining, I mean, that is a tough thing to live up to.
Yeah. And there's just so many ingenious callbacks to The Shining.
Yeah,
like,
they're all really cool.
If you haven't seen it, it's a spoilerific movie to say the least, but if you watch The Shining, you have to watch The Shining to watch it. Like, there's no going around it. This is a movie that hinges on the plot of The Shining.
Yeah.
So
Doctor Sleep is not in my top, but one of my favorite movie scenes of the year was that subversion of the red rum.
Yeah.
scene. I thought that was so cool.
and that's in the trailer, so that's not a spoiler.
Yeah, that's not a spoiler, but that was so
great
cool.
scene.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 8, and I agree that this was personally a pretty good year for horror. Just a lot of interesting movies, horror movies, a lot of weird and bizarre stuff, and I like more and more the weird, bizarre stuff in horror. And my number 8 is Midsummer. This movie has absolutely stuck with me throughout the whole year. Ever since I saw it, it has not left my mind with just how much it affected me. It is one of the more disturbing horror experiences I've seen in quite some time, and I just like what it does. Because it's totally different from Hereditary. And I still don't know sometimes how I feel about Hereditary. I probably need to go back to it to reassess my thoughts on it, because I think I might have underrated it and maybe not understood it the first time I saw it. But Midsummer was one that I liked right away. And even if I return back to Hereditary, I have a feeling I like this one better. But I think what I like the most about it is that its scares are unlike any scares I've seen in any horror movie, I feel like. Because in most horror movies, you expect the horror to take place in the dark. You expect it to take place in mysterious, in the shadows, and for things to pop out of the shadows. I mean, dark is more scary usually, but Ari Aster proves that the light can be just as scary, if not scarier, than the dark. And I think what I like about that is that in the light there is no escape from the horrors in front of you, which is sort of scary in its own way. And I mean, there are just parts of this movie that really sent some of the biggest chills up my spine that I felt in quite some time. It really got to me. And I think also what I like about the movie is that there's some humor thrown in as well. And the humor is it's utterly weird. It's like they're making fun of the cult, basically, the cult that the characters go to, and doing just very weird and bizarre things with them that you're not really sure whether you should be scared or whether you should laugh. So you sort of do both, because it is very uncomfortable and very weird, some of these elongated takes with the cult. Like these dinner scenes that go on for ages, and they just get more and more awkward as they go on, because the characters aren't sure how to react, and you're not sure how to react. And all the performances, pretty much all the performances in this were great. I love Florence Pugh. I think she is one of the most promising actresses working right now, and I'm glad she's getting bigger. I've been keeping my eye on her ever since I saw Lady Macbeth back in 2017. She's got a lot of range. I think she really does well in this lead role. Just the way she nails her character's transformation from beginning to end is really... And also Jack Rayner, who plays her boyfriend, he has a pretty tough role to deal with. Like, his character is absolutely despicable, but you're also supposed to sort of feel for him because a cult screws him over more than really. And I think he really did well. And also, what's his name? And he wasn't in the movie as much as I would be, but oh shoot, Will Poulter. He was amazing in it. But he's good in almost anything. He's convicting no matter what. So yeah, this movie isn't for everyone, because it is a weird, balls to the wall weird movie. One of the oddest horror movies. But I really liked it for cleverness, just for how different it felt. It just feels unique in a horror landscape that can feel cliche. So that's why it ranks so high. Well, ranked in my top 10 at least.
Yeah, it's a movie that exists, that's for sure. Not weird, because I had a movie you hated and you had a movie I hated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. I have nothing to say. So, yeah.
I didn't hate Pet.
Can we rewind to the first minute where he said it was one of his least favorite movies?
Yeah, but I didn't hate it.
So my number 7 is one of my favorite movies, just from how much it succeeded, despite the media wanting it to fail, and like all the little dabs at everything that the movie was trying to do. My number 7 lands at Joker.
That's my number 7.
Oh,
we can just talk about it together.
Okay.
Sort of funny. We always seem to have something that lands in the same exact place.
I mean, yeah, generally we like most of the same stuff, but sometimes it diverts a little bit. But I mean, whatever you think about the message of this movie, I don't think there's any denying that Joker is one of the most impactful movies of this decade. I think, personally.
It's something.
It's one of those movies that it has this quality to it that I'd compare to 2017's It Comes at Night, where everything just collapses into insanity at a certain moment, and like you don't expect it. It comes completely out of left field, and like if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I won't spoil anything if you somehow haven't seen it. It's the part in the train where he encounters those 3 guys in the subway.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one of those parts in film this decade where I've kind of noted that that's kind of one of those things that sticks with you, that moment where things just turn in a full 180. And I think those movies are I think those moments are so underappreciated in movies. And I mean, Joker does pretty much everything well. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix, I have seen him in so very few things. And that's partially because he doesn't really get put in a lot of stuff because, again, the good actors don't get a lot of screen time, unfortunately. But this movie, I think, proves without a shadow of a doubt that this guy has a range unlike any other guy for his acting skills and all that stuff. And I mean, his job as the Joker, I can see why this Joker will probably never interact with Batman because of just how weird and different this Joker is. But he took cues from all the Jokers and kind of melded it into a good Joker, not as good as Heath Ledger, but a good Joker that, and the movie, again, doesn't really feel like a Joker movie. It feels like a story about a guy who is tortured in his life and kind of ends up still on the crap side of things. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I really liked Joker. I dreaded going into the movie because of the discourse surrounding it. It's not because I agreed with the discourse or necessarily disagreed with it. It's just because I was tired of listening to it. Just so much hot takes around this movie that after seeing it are just even more ridiculous to think about in context. I don't want to get into that because that's not what the purpose is. But yeah, it's a good movie. I have a hard time trying to comprehend people who hate this movie. I mean, their opinion is their opinion, but I just don't see it. I don't see it.
I mean, it's made like $1 billion, didn't it?
Oh yeah, it got a lot of money. I mean, money doesn't always mean quality, but
yeah.
It's something to be said when a movie was tried so hard to be taken down by the media, but overcame all the odds. That made me happy. Even if I hadn't liked the movie, I probably still would have been like impressed that it overcame all these odds and really just, it's really impressive how it did it. What I really liked about this movie, like you said, it doesn't feel like a Joker movie. It doesn't feel like a comic book movie either, which I think is refreshing. I love Marvel movies. In fact, spoiler alert, there is going to be a Marvel movie for me.
I wonder what movie in 2019.
What movie
was that?
Be?
I don't.
Marvel, no, it's not. But we do need movies that break from the norm sometimes, and I think that this movie really does it well. It isn't like showing off, like saying, "Oh, look, I'm not a comic book movie. I'm edgy." It just becomes its own thing naturally, which is what I like. I
mean,
about
we both said it, but it does right. It takes. I mean, whether you think The Dark Knight is a good movie or not, it takes a lot of those cues from the Dark Knight trilogy in that it subdues its own subject matter, like The Dark Knight does subdue Batman. I mean, Batman is the main character, but it subdues the main character for the purpose of showing something more important.
I mean, what works about the Christopher Nolan movies is that they do have comic book elements in them, but they also have other genres included in them that make them really stand out. And this movie takes cues from that. And to be fair, it also takes cues from Scorsese movies, but I don't really consider that a criticism, taking cues from one of the best directors working out. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And I don't
think of a movie that wouldn't take cues from Scorsese.
And I mean, I've seen Taxi Driver, and I see the similarities there, but I really don't think it's as overbearing as people are saying it is. And I mean, it goes without saying that Joaquin's performance is excellent. I personally will be rooting for him to win. I think he'll be nominated for the Oscars, and I'll be rooting for him to win.
I think Joker is.
I think Joker has a good chance to be nominated for Best Film now, too, based on the Golden Globes.
Yeah.
Which I didn't expect, but it could happen. But Joaquin Phoenix was just excellent in this. His performance was heartbreaking, to say the least. I mean, it was hard to watch sometimes. And especially at the end of the movie, I don't know if a performance has so deeply affected me in the ending of a movie that it left me speechless and in such awe. It was just incredible. And just structurally, I think this movie is really good in how it builds up the story of the Joker and then there's this big twist surrounding his character. There's like 2 or 3 twists surrounding his character, and each time you look at his character in a totally different way, and it just becomes more and more interesting. See the complexities of this character. And at its core, this movie is really a study about mental health than anything else, which is what I liked about it. It gives some pretty important messages about it, and it does it in a very powerful way, I think. And when this movie does tie into the comics, it's pretty clever how it does it, especially when we see the sort of revolution the Joker inspires and how it really leads to the birth of Batman, which is what the Joker should do, be directly affecting the story of Batman as well. Just great movie, love it. It's not perfect, but it is so good in almost every way. So the fact that it's only at number 7 for both of us shows the quality of the rest of the movies on our list, to be honest.
Yeah, this next movie I have a fair lot to say about, just because of a lot of people's concerns around, and my own personal concerns. My number 6 is Knives Out.
Oh. Okay.
I was really hesitant to go into this movie. It's directed by Rian Johnson, who famously directed one of the worst movies of 2018, The Last Jedi, or 2017, sorry. And at a time I was really bent on not even going to it just because it was directed by Rian Johnson. But I mean, if anything, the reviews swayed me to go to it, and I was at this point where I was just like, I might as well go. I'm interested in it because it's a murder mystery. It's like, I like that type of stuff. I was like, I might as well go to it, and it ended up being one of the best times I've had in a movie this year, and also it was just a quality mystery movie. I mean, yeah. The mystery genre is debatably fading into obscurity in movies, which kind of sucks.
It is sad. Yeah,
I mean, who knows? Next year we got the next Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes, so who knows? Maybe that'll bring it back, but we'll see. But Knives Out, I mean, the first thing I have to say about it is that Daniel Craig is continuing to become one of my favorite actors on the silver screen. I mean, he is, by and large, the motivating force of this movie, and his performance, I don't want to lessen the credence of the other actors, but his performance just blew me away.
Yeah, he was good.
And I mean, it's not a perfect movie. There are some parts that are just kind of, I think they were thrown in to make, I think some parts felt thrown in to pad out the movie's length, and some parts felt thrown in just to kind of be like, ooh, it's a mystery movie. Here's the part where the guy's interviewing everyone. Here's the part where, and I mean, like, it does that, but there's also genuine parts where it subdues the mystery genre. Mm-hmm. Or rather subverts the mystery genre. Mm-hmm. And it really is kind of its own movie. It is a murder mystery, yes, but there are a lot of other aspects of it. It's about family quarrels. It's about individualism in a way. And I mean, if anything, I was just happy to see that Chris Evans is not washed out from the Avengers, and no. I think he's, if anything, it seems like he's more free by being in this movie. I could just tell he was having a great time.
Yeah.
I could tell all the actors were just having a blast. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that Rian Johnson absolutely nailed it with Knives Out. I think it's a very structurally sound movie, 3-act structure all the way through, but there's a lot of twists and turns, and Rian Johnson does a beautiful job of never letting go of that suspense of like who did it, because it's never a clear answer, and even when the answer becomes clear, you're still like, but really, but is that? And even if it is, you're still not sure. And there's a lot of it's just like top tier directing and writing to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I had to say about the movie. It surprised me for sure to how good it was. So
Yeah, very good. All right, so my number 6, and I was literally just mentioning this, but it's Avengers Endgame for number. Yeah. So, I almost considered taking this out of my top 10 at one point because there are parts of the movie that, especially in the second act, that don't quite hold up for me as much. Like the whole time travel portion, I do think that that part is a little bit too long. It takes a little bit too long to get to where it really needs to go. But considering all that, taking all that into account, I still loved this movie and loved how it concluded everything. It's not as good as Infinity War, not by any means, in my opinion. But Infinity War is really sort of in a league of its own. I probably consider that to be at least the second best Marvel movie. Civil War is the only one that barely beats it out. But what works about Endgame just really works. Like that beginning, we'll go into spoilers because you've probably heard them already for this movie. But
if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame by the end of 19,
yeah, I think people who even didn't see any of the other Marvel movies probably went out and saw this one, honestly.
And didn't understand a single thing,
yeah.
But it was in action.
Yeah, but just the beginning of this movie, one of the most risk-taking Marvel moments I've ever seen, where it shows Hawkeye's family all getting faded into oblivion. Just so dark.
And then right after that, Loki gets freaking killed.
Yeah.
Right after that.
And man, the first act of this movie includes some of my favorite moments in any Marvel movie because the movie just sits down and gets quiet for its first hour or so, which you don't usually expect that out of this big action-packed event movie, but it gets quiet. Characters just talk, and they all consider how, yes, they've failed. They did what they were not. They did something wrong, and they suffered the consequences. I'm so glad that the movie dedicated to the hero's failure, because that makes everything work so much better. If they had taken away the weight of Infinity War, this movie would have made me furious, which is what I was worried about, that they'd take away the weight of that incredible ending to Infinity War and sort of cheat out of it. But they don't, which is what I like.
Those freaking Russo brothers, man.
Yep. And the movie focuses on our main characters, which is also great. It's what it should have done. Focus on the main 4 Avengers as well as Hawkeye and Black Widow. Having all those characters complete their character arcs, just utterly satisfying. Every character, I feel like, ended up where I would have wanted them to be. Even though the Iron Man movies have never been my favorite, I don't think you could deny that Robert Downey Jr. has given one of the most perfectly cast hero performances to date. And his character sort of giving the sacrifice is the perfect culmination of where he's come from, this very arrogant and full of himself guy with a heart, but the heart shows itself more, and then just full circle to a self-sacrificing hero who cares about others more than himself. It's just a perfect way to round out his character arc, and him ending off with an improvised line, which he also improvised in the first movie, I am Iron Man line. Just poignant and powerful. But, I mean, my favorite arc was Captain America's, because Captain America's just excellent. Chris Evans is excellent. How can you not like Chris Evans? He's just such a likable guy, and Captain America's just it's just refreshing to have a hero. In a world where there's a lot of anti-heroes, it is refreshing to have a hero who's just genuinely good, and genuinely fights for what he believes in. And Captain America gets exactly what he deserves, which is a happy end. And it was so good to see that. Just so many things to end in this movie. The third act of the movie is also superb. Just some of the best action sequences I've seen in any movie to date.
I mean, it's an explosion akin to the fight in Mordor in Return of the King.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I attribute.
And man, though he wasn't in this as much, Josh Brolin's performance as Thanos was, it was just so good.
I expect to see him in more. I expect people to put him in.
Yeah, Brolin is. I mean, what he did with Thanos, just making the best Marvel villain. There won't be. I don't see how they can match up to Thanos after this. Just because he's the perfect villain. He has compelling motivations. You can sort of sympathize with what he's doing, but he is evil, totally evil too. So Marvel's not really done a villain like that before, and they need to do it again, because as these movies prove, compelling villains make your heroes more interesting as well. Yeah. So please, Marvel, make another villain as good as that, even though it'll be hard. This was a great way to end off the Avengers series. I'm not sure how invested I'll be in the next phase of Marvel. I'll go see the Spider-Man movies because I loved Far From Home, but at least this phase, I'm glad that it ended off in a good fashion.
Yeah. So we're getting into our top fives, which means there's gonna be some absolute bangers in here, to say the least. And my number 5 comes out of a movie that hit me so far from left field I probably would have fallen out of the park. Was the best horror movie of this year, and the only movie that has come even remotely close to touching It Comes at Night for my favorite horror movie of this entire decade, and that's The Lighthouse. And Lord have mercy if I can't say that there has never been a movie that has so enthralled me with consistency. I mean, all of my movies in these top 5s are 5 out of 5s, and I had to put them in an organization to be such. But The Lighthouse is one of the ways that you make a perfect horror movie. And I mean, for one, it has a really unique setting. Like, being in a lighthouse, you don't see a lot of horror movies in a lighthouse. And for two, the focus of the movie, again, I'll stress this, that character is so important in a horror movie. And Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson characters both are just so beautifully done. They're just excellent characters all around. And like these ridiculously weird parts where they're partying around, drinking, eating food disgustingly. It's a charming movie until it becomes not charming.
Yeah.
And once it's not charming, it's again that same thing I said with Joker. It takes this turn that just like really hits you out of nowhere. And once it takes that turn, it's one of those things that I feel like A24 is just genius at overlooking. I don't know what it is about the directors within A24, but they all just love making their movies devolve into insanity. Mm-hmm. And whether it's worked for some of them, the Ari Aster movies have never worked with me, but who directed it again? I forgot his name.
This one?
Yeah.
Robert Eggers.
Robert Eggers.
Who also did
both of his, The Witch and this one. I think these, and of course Trey Edward Schultz, It Comes at Night, all of those, I feel like those evolve into insanity in the best way possible. This one, probably one of the most insane endings to a movie I've seen in a while. But it almost works in a way. And I think it works because the movie sets itself up to be freaking weird. And it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And it ends so abruptly and strangely. And I mean, that's just one of the best parts about these types of movies, is like you're left questioning so many things. And again, what I like about all of these weird indie movies is that most of them seem to leave you with a little bit of an open-ended interpretation. That's what I liked about this one a lot too. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about The Light.
For sure. So my number 5 is another movie that I was a little worried about. That I was afraid it was going to really ruin the legacy of what the other movies have done, but it ended up just pleasantly being one of the best things this company has produced this decade. It's Toy Story 4. I didn't see the need for this movie. I don't think a lot of people did. Like, 3 ended I thought, ended the series as good as it possibly could have. I didn't think we needed any more, but now after seeing Toy Story 4, we did need more. We really did.
I don't know how Pixar does it, but
they've had some stinkers this decade. They've had Cars 2, they've had Cars 3, The Good Dinosaur, and somehow around this time they've also had Inside Out and Coco. So a bit of a more inconsistent track record. They used to be releasing bangers year after year. So it was nice that we ended off the decade with another good one. Keeping the Toy Story movies as their best movie series. I mean, there's not much competition, to be fair, at all.
Yeah.
But really, what made this movie work so much was Woody himself. The movie was really about him. It was sort of unfortunate that a lot of other characters got relegated to the background. Like Buzz was practically a non-entity in this movie, which was a little disappointing. But Woody's arc was so good and so well realized and just so beautifully done and emotional and just really adults. Like the movie the movies have grown up with the audience, and it grows up here because Woody is basically like an old wise sage here now. Like he's gotten to this point where he's realizing that he needs to move on from being this toy that's being played with. That's not his role anymore. Like he's trying to figure out what his role is now in this new stage of life. It's just something that's sort of relatable when you get to a certain age, and it's really powerful how they explore that.
One of the riskiest, probably, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think it's one of the risks that Pixar has done to make a theme as mature as that.
Yeah.
For a movie arguably geared towards kids.
Yeah.
I feel like the last two toys have not been geared towards kids in their complexity.
No.
And it's so strange to make complexity like this.
Yeah, for sure. Pixar does it so well. And just the ending of this movie is so good. It's like I don't want them to make a 5 now. I mean, I think 4 ended it off even better, really.
Yeah,
I honestly like 4 a little better than 3. My favorite Toy Story is still the original, but that's also my favorite Pixar movie. But 4 is just, it blew me away. And there's, the return of Bo Peep was nice. I liked what they did with her character in this. Really giving her a more substantial arc, and I think she was really good. Key and Peele are absolutely hysterical.
Gosh, I lost it with them.
They were my favorite elements besides Woody. They were so funny.
I don't know if they've ever done any voice acting, but it was ingenious what they did.
Yep, and
they worked so perfectly.
I think Pixar knew what their dynamic was, and I honestly think they let them improvise a lot. That's just the vibe I got, which wouldn't surprise me. And it was just, they were just so good too. And the villain in this was really good. Like, at first I was rolling my eyes because it was like, the villain is sort of similar to Lotso in a lot of ways, but what they do with the villain, I mean, it's not even really a villain by the end. It's incredible. Everything they do, they sort of surprise you. It's such a good, it's one of Pixar's most surprising movies, and a pleasantly I'm so glad it made my list. I was honestly expecting to not like it, but I ended up loving it.
Yeah. So my number 4 is it's one you already talked about. It's also Avengers Endgame. There isn't much else to say that you already said. So I'll just say that I second everything James said, and also the thing I appreciated most was that it seems throughout this movie that I love the emphasis on Spider-Man and Iron Man's relationship, and how I just love how they used Spider-Man and the Avengers to be a motivating force for Tony Stark's change. Like, it's so well done from like the first Spider-Man. Even though I didn't think the first Spider-Man was great, I didn't expect them to do as much with their relationship, but they really do turn into this kind of emotional attachment to the viewer.
I actually have something to say about that, because I remember when I watched the first Spider-Man, I thought that Tony Stark was only in there just to have his name recognition attached. But now seeing Endgame and Infinity War, they clearly had a plan.
It does, yeah.
So my perspective is changed.
I mean, it just goes to show how genius the plan for these movies was, that they planned that far ahead for this to be the way it goes, that Spider-Man comes back and it's this really tragic moment. But I mean, it's also the motivating force for the next Spider-Man, which is just another genius plot device that like everything in these movies has had a reason for happening. And like I just loved everything that Endgame did to kind of wrap it up, but also feel like everything's going to continue in a way. And like we all know that most of the stuff is going to turn into Disney Plus shows. I mean, there's a Black Widow movie, but there's going to be a lot of Disney Plus stuff that continues this. And honestly, if it's as good quality as Disney Plus already has shown, then I mean, Endgame wasn't just the end. It was the end of one thing, but it's the beginning of many other things that I think could be really good if done correctly. And like you said, you know, Thanos is just one of the most fascinating villains to grace the silver screen in a long time. I mean, like, his presence on the screen nearly matched Joker from The Dark Knight, in my opinion. And while it wasn't as hard-hitting, fascinating character development as in Infinity War, I did agree that I think the quiet tone was so very different and like so risky to do, but it worked. It clearly worked. So I just appreciated Endgame for being something different again. Same with Infinity War, just something different to sink your teeth into for superhero stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. My number 4 is one that I talked about. It's The Lighthouse. So I also loved just how incredibly weird this movie was. I mean, it's definitely it's the movie experience unlike any other. Just what it does. A lot of cool things going on here. I really like how it sort of had some silent film inspirations to
I didn't
it.
even mention that it's in 4:3
Yeah.
and black and white.
Yeah, 4:3, black and white, which is not very typical of any film to do right now.
Yeah.
But it does feel like you're watching a relic from a long time ago in the way the film's formatted. It's pretty slow moving. It's not paced like a lot of movies are at this time. Dialogue can be pretty sparse in some places. I mean, the beginning parts of the movie, there's hardly any talking at all. I was honestly curious at first if there was going to be no dialogue, which would have been an interesting move. But when the dialogue does come, man, there is some good dialogue in this movie, especially from Willem Dafoe's character. I mean, he perfectly embodies this like old sailor type that's just had so many experiences on the sea, and he tells some stories in this movie, and it's like, and I could have honestly sat for the whole movie listening to him telling these creepy sea stories about weird things happening, because just the way he tells them is so interesting. And Golden Globes, you really snubbed him. You did not nominate him. How dare you?
Snubbed The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
As a movie.
Really snubbed it. It should have gotten some recognition. And Robert Pattinson is great in this. I think Robert Pattinson is very unfairly judged for his time in Twilight, and he wasn't. And even from the clips I've watched, he wasn't even really the worst element of it. He had horrible dialogue.
It's the same with the Star Wars prequel. Bad writing.
Yeah.
That really hurt.
Yeah, and when he is great, he's just really great. And
he blew me out of the water, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is the same guy from Twilight?
yeah,
Really?
he is so good in this.
Rest assured about Batman if they've got a good writer.
Oh yeah, I think he'll be a great Batman. Yeah, I just liked what he did and all the stuff he did in the movie, and just how dedicated he was to delving into it. It was actually pretty crazy how dedicated he was to it. And the chemistry between him and Dafoe was just on point. You could tell that Eggers really just focused on their chemistry a lot in the movie, and just where their characters. I love that their characters constantly have a shifting power dynamic. Like sometimes Dafoe's character is the one dominating, and other times it's Pattinson's character who has the power. And it just makes you wonder who's going to have the power at the end of it all. And then, of course, there's the whole mystery of what the heck does the lighthouse do? And there's not really a definitive answer given, which is what I like. I like that it sort of leaves it a bit of a mystery what the supernatural power of the lighthouse is. And maybe that the power isn't even real, that it's just all in their heads and that they're going crazy, which is sort of the interpretation I like to go with that. Because the movie has a whole theme of like isolation and how it affects them both. Yeah, there's something else that we did not talk about was how sound is used.
Yes.
Holy crap,
Yeah.
the sound design in this movie
Excellent sound.
is superb. It really dictates a lot of the more intense moments of the movie. And yeah, there's some balls to the wall crazy moments in this movie, like a mermaid and a freaking squid monster. It's something.
I think that was one thing that we mentioned that could have changed about. I would have loved to have more of that sea lore, the seafaring lore, the mythological connections to it all.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can kind of interpret, is that like you can even interpret if the place was freaking real. Like it's there's just so much nice interpretive stuff that you can kind of let your mind run wild with.
Right.
This is one of the movies that did that better, in my opinion.
Yeah. I really like what Eggers is doing. I can't wait to see what he does next.
So, my number 3 could or could not be surprising, depending on your interpretation, but this is a series that has kind of stuck with me for, I think it's been a whole decade since this series started. This is the series that has had a painstakingly long journey of going through each of the films, because it's How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World.
I figured that.
How to Train Your Dragon is one of those series that it's like Kung Fu Panda. It's one of those animated series that kind of gets left in the dust with its reception, but it's one of those special trilogies that has really made its own lore and its own world, and it's just, The Hidden Worlds, it just consistently stuns me how well DreamWorks does with what they do. I mean, like, DreamWorks isn't as popular as Pixar, sure, but I think they do just as good work as Pixar. With the Kung Fu Panda, maybe not so much Shrek, but whatever.
Yeah.
But How to Train Your Dragon is still my favorite animated. The first one is still my favorite animated movie, and this trilogy is probably my favorite animated trilogy. And The Hidden World only solidifies how good it is. Like, it's a movie that was consistently threatened with having basically the same villain as the one from the second one, having a similar plot structure. Like, all the movies have a very similar plot structure, and it was going into this having the dragons romancing with each other. It had all this stuff that was like, it seemed like it was going for the cliche of an ending, but it did not at all. I mean, like, Hiccup and Astrid's relationship is done so well. I mean, Jay Baruchel's voice acting for Hiccup is so unbelievably good. And I mean, America Ferrera is a good voice actress too, and the whole cast just gets a really great chance to kind of get their best moments. I mean, even a character like I forgot the guy with the black hair's name. Oh, the guy who loves Astrid before.
Is it Rough Night?
No. I forgot his name.
I don't remember his name either.
But the guy with the black hair, he gets some of his coolest moments in this film, I think, and just the whole it doesn't feel quite as epic as the other ones, because the central theme of these past two movies is like having a giant dragon, and like that was kind of one of the disappointing things for me, was that this one didn't have like a crazy evil dragon, like huge dragon. But the more you think about it, the more it's like this movie is a conclusion, and it's more focused on the characters, which is just excellent. And I mean, like, it's one of those movies that this trilogy is one of those movies, I think, for me, that defined this decade as like a consistent force of like excellent top tier animation, especially with this one, like just how gorgeous, and like you can tell it takes them, you can tell that 3 years does some good work for these movies, and just like the consistent quality of it, and like the ending is so well done. I hope they don't do a fourth one of this.
Yeah,
I don't I don't think they will. I know they're doing other books adaptations, but this trilogy should be left where it is, because it's just such a perfect trilogy. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so my number three is The Farewell. And this is a foreign movie taking place in China? Yeah, it's China. And the movie, you didn't see this, did you?
I don't think.
Well, it's about this Chinese family. The main girl, whose name is Billy, her grandmother has cancer, but she doesn't know she has.
Oh, that's right.
The rest of the family does know, and basically the idea is that they aren't going to tell her that she has cancer, and two of the other characters in the movie are getting married. I mean, they aren't actually like really to the point where they want to be married yet, but they don't think the grandmother has much time, so they're wanting to do a cheerful wedding to as a last thing to remember the grandmother by, and maybe just end off on the happiest note possible. This movie was incredible. It's a comedy and it's a drama, and it nails both aspects so well. I mean, there's parts of the movie that are just incredibly funny, and a lot of them come from the grandmother who doesn't have cancer, or who does have cancer, sorry, who doesn't know she has cancer, and she's just such a charming character, just very lovable. You feel for her, which makes it all the more sad that you know she has cancer in the movie. And the main character, Billy, is great. I think what they did a great job at making her the main character, because one of the themes of the movie is like trying to understand the differences between cultures. Because in American culture, in our individualistic culture, they would tell the person that they have cancer. I think it's illegal here to keep it a secret from the person who have cancer, but in Chinese culture, it's fine if you don't tell. And the reason they don't is because, and it's very interesting how they explain it, that they want to all hold the burden for her instead of putting the burden on her. And Billy doesn't necessarily understand that because she's been raised in American culture. Wouldn't it be more of a burden for the individual to not ever know they have this disease and to just suddenly one day realize they're dying and that their family didn't tell them? So I think that is just so interestingly explored. And all the family, like every single character, there's about like 10 or 11 main cast members, and all of them are just so distinct, have their own interesting personalities, and it's just interesting to see the different perspectives the characters have. Like the younger generation of characters, teenage characters, are definitely more wanting to tell their grandmother that she has cancer, while the older ones are trying to keep it a secret, but it still takes an emotional toll on them too. It's just beautiful the way family dynamics are nailed in this. Just one of the best real feeling families I've ever seen in a movie. It's wonderful. Yeah, I don't have much else to say because there's not really any problems I had with it, to be honest. Just a beautiful movie. Touching.
So, my number 2 movie was probably for the longest time of 2019 one of my most anticipated movies to see, and it's one of those movies that was almost guaranteed to be successful at the very least. But my number 2 and number 1 were so difficult to judge. It was so difficult to judge, but not my number 2 ended up being Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't exactly know where to start with this movie. Quentin Tarantino has this crazy track record of of just insanely good movies. His key style is sort of this like it he has a style where like all of his endings to his movies are just crazy, out of nowhere insanity, ridiculous. And this is one of those movies I think that that you would be shaming yourself if you didn't see. It's so good. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio has continually impressed me with how good of an actor he is. And Quentin Tarantino just did an excellent job. And I mean, along with Brad Pitt, those two together are just, that's some of the most golden relationships I've seen in a movie in a long time. And like, everything around this movie, plot the plot is definitely a movie plot. It's a plot about movies, which is, you could say that's kind of cliche in a way, and sure it is, but it's a subversion of that. And more than anything, it's a movie about the struggling artist and it seems like the general struggle of living in Hollywood as someone who wants to go into film. And of course, as someone who wants to go into film, that struck with a chord, an emotional chord that was very well done. And whether this movie was created for that doesn't matter, because the plot is so ingeniously done. There's this weird and almost anthological sort of structure to it, where it's following these two separate characters, but eventually it all comes together. And all I can say is that it comes together in one of the craziest endings to a movie I've seen in a while, and it's totally deserved for how toned down the movie is. And like, it's just an excellently done movie, and there's not a lot to say because it's just an excellent movie, and that's just that. It's just an excellent movie. So yeah.
My number 2 is also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'll keep my thoughts somewhat short for this one because I think we're both gonna have a lot to say about our number 1. But I mean, yeah. What I really liked about this movie the most is that it does sort of feel like a throwback to like old time movie Hollywood, because it moves at a pace that old time Hollywood movie. And the plot just sort of, it happens to the character, which is what I like. Like, the characters aren't necessarily dictating the plot. It just sort of comes to them naturally, which makes the world feel much more real to me. Like, it just sort of feels like you're watching life happen. It's really interesting. I'm not really sure how else to describe it. It's a pretty unique movie experience, and it's something only Tarantino could do really in this way. Yeah, all the performances in this are really good. All the main performances are great. Leonardo DiCaprio is absolutely wonderful. I love how he plays his character in this way to where he doesn't know that he is a bit of a dunce, a bit of a moron.
Yeah.
But which makes him a lot funnier.
And he has this great accent too that just like makes it even funnier.
Yeah, I mean the part, and this was in the trailer, but it went a little longer in the movie where he was forgetting his lines in this movie scene, and he goes into a trailer and basically yells at himself. It is one of the funniest scenes I've seen all year. And Brad Pitt provides like the perfect counterpart because he's the exact opposite. He's very self-aware. Yeah. He is smart. He's slick. He knows his stuff. And I love how him and DiCaprio work off each other. And even though she wasn't in the movie as much as I thought she would be, I really liked Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate. She's just really dedicated to embodying this character. When you watch, I just watched like a clip from that Sharon Tate movie out of curiosity, and it's uncanny how well she replicates her accent and look and everything. She's really dedicated to it. I really liked the theme of like old Hollywood dying out and new Hollywood coming in, with old Hollywood being represented by DiCaprio and new Hollywood being represented by Tate. And even though like Tarantino looks at old Hollywood like dying out with a bit of bittersweetness, I think he also looks at new Hollywood with a sense of hope because of Sharon Tate, which I think is sort of inspiring and can sort of inspire other filmmakers and stuff, that he's not like pessimistic about either side of the Hollywood spectrum. And yeah, the ending of this movie, it's just typical Tarantino fashion.
Ridiculous.
It's one of my favorite of Tarantino's endings, though. It's just when DiCaprio comes out in this one scene at the end, and just what he does to this character is so funny. It's like, it's cold-blooded murder, but it's so funny because he doesn't even know why the character's there, and he still murders them. It's so funny.
He just comes out and he's just wearing like some casual bathrobe.
Yeah.
And his hair is so good.
And yeah, and this movie does change around Sharon Tate's story, because in real life, Sharon Tate was actually murdered by the Manson family. But they change it around in this. But I think that it's not exploitative, because it's sort of like a different way of looking at the situation. Like, it's not like making light of the tragedy, and it's and what makes it work is that it characterizes like the murderers and complete idiots. It doesn't romanticize them, which is great. Tarantino makes them look like dolts, just like he made the Nazis look like idiots. Inglourious Bastard. So, yeah, this was a superb movie. Pretty much pitch perfect. No problems with it.
There's no
one of my 2 5-star movies this year.
And since I'm pretty much fully aware that we both have the same number one movie, I'm going to say that I think Cats was an excellent movie.
Oh my God,
Ian McKellen did a great job.
Yeah.
He was not blackmailed into this movie at all.
Nope.
And
Cats
the
is wonderful.
The visual effects are ingenious. And we're going to stop now. Good grief, kill me. Yeah, I think our number one is definitely Parasite.
Oh yeah, it's Parasite.
Lord, where do you start? Well, I don't want to butcher these people's names, but the director, Bong Joon-ho, I think. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
I think
Probably
that's
not,
right.
but we'll see.
I think that's right.
Where has this guy been exactly? Why hasn't he gotten like every Golden Globe nomination that exists? Because Parasite is, I mean, it's the same thing with all these movies that just pop up out of nowhere, and just this movie did take a lot of people by surprise, I think, because it just kind of popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the best movie of the year for both of us, and it's gotten pretty much universal praise. And like, to say it's like an ingeniously done movie is correct. And it's a movie that, to me, takes everything about movies in this decade and just multiplies them by infinity. It is another one of those movies that combines a lot of genres together. But Joon-ho just, gosh, he nailed it. Like, you could talk for a little bit.
Yeah, there's even in writing my review, I feel like I didn't make my review very long because I didn't know how to describe my feelings about this movie. Now, similar to Blade Runner 2049, like, I feel like I could have made
Which was also both of our favorite movies in 2017.
Yeah, like, with both of those movies, I don't know how to say any more than that the movie is a masterpiece and one of the best things. One of the best movies. Parasite is one of the best movies of the decade.
For sure.
Will probably be in my top 15 of the decade. And yeah, I guess I'll start here. I think with you mentioning about the different genres, this movie had a tough job of transitioning from a comedy to a horror movie. And the tonal shift there is just, it's one to the other. Like, the second half of the movie isn't funny at all, and the first half of the movie is very funny.
It's got some really funny. Basically what this movie revolves around is this family. It's South Korea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This South Korean family. They're very, very poor. They're like in seemingly one of the poorest neighborhoods in South Korea, and they're literally like living in this house that's like under a street, And so basically, the plot is great because they come up with this ingenious way of like bringing their family into the Park family as the rich
rich family, yeah.
and this supremely rich family. Essentially, the whole poor family comes into the Park family, and they essentially invade their home and with everybody in their family, and they're all like given these jobs and like get really good pay, and it's essentially their ploy to get out of poverty. But I mean, everything just goes south so quickly. Like the plot twist is just so out of left field that like you would have never seen it coming in. Like, I honestly and truly never got the impression that this was going to be a horror movie.
No, I didn't.
And it just turns into a full-on horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so ingeniously done because like like the big moment at towards near the end of the movie just happens so quickly, and like you're just left speechless. It's like it was that like jaw hanging moment like in It Comes at Night, where it's like what just happened?
And what's really interesting about the movie is the title itself just plays so well into the movie. Asks the question, who is the parasite here? Is it the poor family who is deceiving this rich family and basically lying to them about what they are and trying to become something they're not? Or is it the rich family who has privilege that they're not aware of and just sort of judges the poor family, sometimes without even realizing it? Like there's just these 2 or 3 really poignant scenes where the Park father, every time it seems like his cue to be disgusted with the poor is when he smells something, and every time it happens, it's just an incredible build up to how they and the payoff to it is it's just so good. And really, the movie doesn't really answer the question of who the parasite is. I think the parasite isn't even really either family. It's just sort of the concept of how the society works. Like, it's unavoidable that the privileged people will continue to be privileged, and the poor people will continue to live in poverty. It's just like an equal system, and it's not like the Parks are bad people necessarily, which is what I liked. They're actually pretty charming people. Except for maybe the father, who seems... Even he seems ignorant to how horrible he can be. The mother of the Park family actually seems like a pretty decent person, and she just doesn't realize.
Ignorant.
Yeah, she's ignorant. And it's great how the movie shows how different things affect each family differently. Like, there's something as simple as rain. When the Parks see the rain, they see it as a blessing, as a way to bring life back and everything like that. But the Kims, it floods their house.
Their house, yeah.
And so the rain is not a good thing for them. And yeah, the tone transition in this movie from comedy to horror is so good, and when it happens, it's really white-knuckled, and you're sort of sitting back like, whoa, what am I seeing? But it doesn't give you a chance to catch your breath, which is what I like. And it's a ride. It's a ride. But what if anything, what really nailed this movie for me was the end. The movie dedicates to having quite a foreboding and not happy ending, which this movie shouldn't have had a happy ending based on where it was going. I'm glad that Jun Bong-ho dedicated just keeping this ending as morbid as possible. It really leaves an impression. This movie it's incredible. And Oscars, you better nominate it, not just for Best Foreign Film.
Best Picture.
Best Picture. It needs a Best Picture.
It gets Best Foreign Film hands down, but if it doesn't get nominated for Best Picture, I'm quitting film. Because this is one of those movies that comes around so rarely.
Yeah.
Like, just a movie of this quality, and like, it defies everything that Hollywood wants. Like, Hollywood wants a happy-go-lucky ending. Like, it wants everything to be okay at the ending. Like, this movie does not do that.
Right.
And I think its success is more than deserved, because we don't like some movies deserve a happy ending, but we need movies that tell the reality. And this is one of those movies I feel like that showed the harsh reality in one of the best ways possible. And like it was just that realism that made like the turn so stunning. Was like, does this actually happen in South Korea? Like, who knows? Like, I mean, I don't know much about that culture, but I'm sure he took inspiration from that culture.
Yeah.
To like,
No doubt.
there was something much larger about the message of this film, and that was something it was just, I mean, like everything about this movie was just so ingeniously done, and I will be looking with hard eyes into what he does next in the future, because I hope he just keeps on making movies like this.
And can we talk about the performances of the movie
The
for
characters,
Because
yes.
all the actors are in
Yeah.
this movie. My personal favorite was Kim Ki-woo, the brother of the family. I mean, his character was just so intriguing, like what they did. He's the first one of the family to start deceiving, and it's interesting where his character goes in this development he has. Like, you don't see his character ending up where he does, but then when you look back at the movie, it's like, oh, his character couldn't have ended up. It's just all the characters, all of them are just so intriguing. And even though he was my favorite, the best performance was Kang Ho Song as Kim, the father of the family. He is wonderful.
I mean, he was my favorite character pretty much throughout. His performance, I don't know what it is about him. Everything about him just felt like he was part of that world to begin with. Like, it really felt like he was the head of this family, and his goal throughout is to protect his family and to like his dedication to his family is just so like, his character is just so straight and understandable, but yet he brings this level of intrigue to his character that like he does so many things that you would not expect his character to do. And that's one of those things about the depth of his character that I just loved so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think pretty much every actor just like, I didn't feel like there was one person who took the screen over. Like,
no.
It felt like everybody was just there.
Everybody had their...
And it was just one of those things that like only a director like Junho could have done so well.
There are some movies of... There's one called Snowpiercer. Evans in it. That's really
he
good.
did that. Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's...
Another one called Okja that's on...
I remember seeing the ads
Yeah,
for
we
that.
have to watch Snow. Anyway, do we want to do some quick honorable mention?
I mean, I only have one, so...
Well, I have several.
Okay.
I'm just gonna name my bottom 5 that missed out on my list. So my number 11, I saw this movie a couple weeks ago, was The Irishman by Martin Scorsese. Just Scorsese. It's gonna be quality. And every performance here was... Nero was superb. The movie is just, it's a good gangster movie. That's really what it is at its core, and it's really a great watch. How to Train Your Dragon 3 was an honorable mention of mine as well. This one almost made my top 10, just barely missed out. And this was one I hated taking out of my top 10 because, like you, I loved how it ended the series. I think it was poignant. Just some of the way it replicated the shots from the first movie really got to me. Just really, you could tell that they were dedicated to their craft. 13 was Marriage Story. This stars Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, and the title is sort of ironic because the couple is getting a divorce. But the movie has a lot of stuff like allusions to theater and stuff. So I'm a theater person, so I'm going to be biased to something like that. And it's really a touching movie, and there's some incredible... Other one was Knives Out. This was the one, like I said, I was considering whether this one or Ready or Not. This one sort of got the short end, but I still loved it. And finally was Ad Astra. Brad Pitt was great in this. I liked his...
There was one movie this year that essentially just made this year so good for movies, and this was something I desperately wanted to put in my top 10, but I wanted to put movies that were in 2019. I wanted to put this one in there, but my one honorable mention is an honorable mention, and it was seeing Alien in theaters.
Oh.
I mean, say what you will about Alien, but there was something about seeing it in theaters that just riveted me to just continue creating. Alien is one of those movies that every time, like personally, every time I see it, I'm just so creatively restored by seeing that movie. It's just an ingenious movie from bottom to top, from side to side, and it has slowly risen in my top favorite movies of all time, and it's certainly probably going to end up being my favorite horror movie, period. And like, it's seeing it in theaters was just one of those things that just like it's one of those things you should do if you have that chance to see a movie like that in theaters, because it's just such a legendary movie, and that was my one honorable mention. So yeah, I think that's about it for this one. Top 10 movies of 2019. Very good year for movies.
Yes.
I felt like it started off kind of slow,
It did.
but
Got better.
after Endgame,
Yeah,
things just
it
started
picked up.
ramping up. So yeah, I was very satisfied with this year with movies. So thank you all for watching. Next up is music and songs, which is going to be 4 times as long as this one. So music and albums and songs.
We'll get there eventually.
We both did it. Okay. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all next one. Peace out.